This video is sponsored by NordVPN. The EU single market is the largest of its kind in the world. It is built on the free movement of goods, services, capital, and people. But these freedoms are far from completed.
Companies across Europe demand that we make business easier for them. Harmonization cannot wait. We need to complete the single market. And we have to do it fast.
The EU could become an economic superpower.
We have a full program of upcoming initiatives.
The 28th savings and investment, a new fleet of omnibuses. Huh? Let's have a look at how our single market can make us competitive again. The single market for goods is the EU's crowning achievement. Out of all four freedoms, this is the one that has come the furthest over the last 30 years. But even today, there are small, often invisible barriers between the EU countries. And the IMF estimates that these barriers weigh on Europe's economy like a 44% tariff. Yes, 44%. That's almost 3 times higher than the 15% tariff Trump imposed on the EU this year. To understand these so-called invisible tariffs, the Financial Times published a great article, linked in the description, that breaks it down using a simple example. Yeah. And a stuffed animal from IKEA. Now, before we get into that, one of the other great ironies of the EU single market is that despite movement on paper, your digital access still changes the moment you cross a border. I really noticed this very year. I travel a lot for work, from Brussels to Strasbourg and even to conferences in Spain. That's why our sponsor NordVPN comes in. Link in the description below. Whether I'm editing scripts or answering emails from a cafe, hopping between trains or using hotel Wi-Fi, I know my connection is encrypted and consistent, even on public networks. I just turn it on and don't have to think about it. And in the evening, when things really slow down, I can use NordVPN to keep accessing my paid online services from back home. So everything looks and works the way I'm used to when I'm traveling. If the single market is about reducing friction, NordVPN does the same online. You can get an exclusive NordVPN deal plus 4 extra months by going to nordvpn.com/EUMadeSimple. It's completely risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, back to the single market and why it still isn't finished. Remember our cuddly toy which was just thrown into my face, Meerkat from IKEA. And the first thing you notice is the actual labels on the toy. They're longer and bigger than the animal itself. And that's because of loads of EU regulations, but also national ones. I mean, just have a look at this. These are the textile rules in the EU. It has more than 20 languages on there, all explaining what's in this animal. So that's already this long piece right here. And then we also have another piece right here where there's environmental rules. One from the UK. There's another one here from Chile, which, okay, it's not in the EU, but still it's on there. And there's another massive one here from France, which basically says that you can donate this, you can also recycle it, or you can return it to the store. And it's mandatory in France, so every toy has to have this. IKEA obviously wants to be able to sell this product in multiple countries in the EU. So rather than having to reproduce this animal with different labels, they just stick it all in one label. It cost IKEA millions, and of course across Europe, companies billions, because they had to redo their whole packaging and everything. Thousands of hours of workers went on that label. And that's the complete irony, because when parents buy this toy for their kids, the first thing they do is literally cut off all the labels, which defeats the whole point of having them in the first place. And it produces loads more waste, which is obviously inefficient. So this basically shows how the paperwork and the labels are different in the single market and don't really connect. A bottle of water shows something even greater, that even the systems don't connect. Countries like Germany, Denmark, Lithuania, Finland, and many, many others all run deposit return schemes, in short, DRS. This means that if you buy a bottle of water in, let's say, Germany, you pay a small deposit of 25 cents, and you can get it back when you return the empty bottle for recycling. But while this concept is environmentally excellent, the systems are so fragmented across Europe. Every participating country has its own unique requirements, specific recycling logos, distinct barcode rules, separate national product databases. And of course, approved container formats. This means that a bottle that is perfectly legal in Germany cannot be sold in Denmark without significant redesign and re-registration. So yeah, it's the same drink, the same plastic, and potentially the same factory, but the different countries demand different packaging, registration, and supply chain logistics. For large multinationals, this is expensive, but manageable. For smaller producers, it often simply isn't. Many decide not to export at all or to sell only in 1 or 2 neighboring countries. And consumers like you and me feel this too. If you take a bottle of water across a border, you often cannot get your deposit back, even inside of the EU. And there are so many more examples. Take construction, for instance. A fire-resistant door approved under Germany's DIN standards cannot automatically be sold in France, which uses different fire testing methods and certification rules. Or even food. A small Swedish company was making falafels in the Nordic market. The baking powder they used was legal in Sweden, but in Denmark, it wasn't approved for falafels. Same ingredients, same product, different rules. So they had to change the entire recipe and redo the approvals, wasting valuable time and money. And yeah, the list goes on. But now, let's not be too pessimistic, as the EU has come such a long way, and the single market remains one of Europe's biggest achievements. But it's also very clear that more needs to be done. That's why there are several initiatives underway to reduce exactly the kinds of frictions we've been talking about. Take our first example, the IKEA Micat and its endless labels. The EU is currently working on something called a digital product passport. In the future, manufacturers will have to create a digital record for each of their products, explaining how it complies with EU rules, from safety standards to recyclability and environmental requirements. So, instead of printing all of the information in dozens of languages, consumers would access it digitally, usually through a QR code. That code would then be attached to the product, its packaging, or accompanying documentation. This is great news. It means less paper, fewer labels, and fewer country-specific variations. And then there's our bottle example. Here too, the EU is finally acting. The recently adopted Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, or PPWR, requires all EU member states to have deposit return schemes for single-use plastics and metal beverage containers, up to 3 liters by the 1st of January 2029. Unlike in the past, when countries designed their systems entirely on their own, this now creates an EU-wide framework and a common deadline. And the potential upside is huge. In 2022, the European Parliament estimated that reducing regulatory complexity and easing trade in goods within the EU could deliver economic benefits of between 228 billion euros and 372 billion euros every year. That's a massive amount. It would raise EU GDP by 1.2 to 2% just by making the single market work better for goods. And remember, this is only about goods. We haven't even touched upon the other 3 freedoms. On average, the EU's invisible barrier for goods is equivalent to a 44% tariff. But for services, it's even worse, closer to a staggering 110%. Which tells you something important. The EU's biggest economic gains are not overseas. They're right here, locked inside its own market. This is what I think. I think completing the single market is one of the biggest opportunities we have, because that will make us super competitive again on the world stage. Our market is massive. We have 450 million people, and if more people were to join our union, we'd have even more. So this is something we need to address, and I really see 3 things we need to do instantly. Firstly, you might have heard of this, but the EU has something called regulation and directives. Now, directives is basically when the EU creates a law or says we need to do this in the EU, more like a goal, and all of the countries can then decide how they want to implement that. For example, the whole idea of fund on bottles. Every country can use their own system. However, a regulation, on the other hand, means that it has to be aligned across the EU. Same law implemented the same way everywhere. Now, obviously, the EU does more directives than regulation, which is the wrong approach. The second thing we need to address is enforcement. So the European Commission, basically the EU's executive, they need to enforce the laws that the EU makes. And to be honest, the Commission has been slacking over the last couple of years by making sure that member states actually do what they're supposed to do with European regulation. And finally, we have the 28th regime, which is one of the favorite topics of this channel, and we're really looking forward to the implementation next year. Basically what it means is that alongside the national rulebooks, so national laws, which differ hugely, imagine Spain's rulebook and Romania's rulebook, we create a 28th rulebook, which is called the 28th regime. And here, a law which is too hard to harmonize across 27 countries would be a new European law, into which companies could opt into instead of national laws. It's a super exciting topic, and we create a whole video on this linked right here above. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want to support the channel, you can also check out NordVPN via the link in the description. It helps protect your data when you're using public networks. And thank you to our presidents, Jan Chauke, Christian Peter, Alexander, Daniel, Upedia, HEVD, Kiki, Luxon, Rashid, Stefan, Unite Europe, and Europe. See you in the next video.